Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the middle of a moment where a really complex financial scam just starts to fall apart. It's this raw, super tense conversation that kicks off with a direct accusation, but as you'll see, it ends somewhere closer to a conspiracy.
All right, so let's get right into it. The whole thing starts with this really direct accusation. It just drops us, bam, right in the middle of this high-stakes showdown. You got one guy who's tracked down another because he's been told this is the man behind a massive investment fraud.
So you can just imagine, the air in that room is so thick with mistrust. The guy making the accusation, well, he's done his homework. I mean, he figured out who the other guy was, tracked him down, and now they're sitting face to face. And he's there for one reason, to demand answers about where his money went. Okay, so the man on the receiving end of this accusation, he starts to lay out his side of the story. He's like, look, I was introduced to this woman, Ghazala Din, way back in early 2020. And he's careful to point out he didn't just jump in blindly. No, he says other people were vouching for her, which made him feel confident. So he starts investing, he even brings more people in, and for a while, everything seemed fine. But then it all just stopped. The payments went completely cold. But the accuser, he isn't backing down. He makes it crystal clear why he's there. He basically says, look, from everything we've heard, you're the guy who has the money. See, this man's name just kept popping up over and over again in his own investigation, and it didn't position him as another victim, not at all. It made him look like a central player in the whole scheme.
But this is where things get really interesting, because the whole dynamic, this feeling of confrontation, it's about to shift completely. They're going to go from enemies to collaborators, and it all comes down to one single, totally misunderstood piece of evidence.
So the accuser pulls out his trump card. He says he has a chart, a document, that he believes implicates the very man he's sitting across from. He's like, your name kept coming up, and plus, there's this little chart. For him, this is it. This is the smoking gun, the proof he needed. And this is just a perfect illustration of the turning point. The accuser shows him this spreadsheet, a list of names, investment amounts, and the other guy's eyes go wide. He recognizes it instantly. And why? Because he's the one who made it.
And boom, that's the moment the whole narrative just flips on his head. This spreadsheet, it wasn't some kind of master list for a criminal enterprise. He explains that Ghazala, the scammer, actually asked him to make it just to keep track of all the smaller investments that were being pooled together. So the document that looked like proof of guilt, it was actually the first piece of proof that they were both being played by the very same person.
So with that initial suspicion just completely gone, they start talking, really talking. They start comparing notes, and as they do, they begin to uncover this really disturbing and almost predictable pattern of lies. One of them will mention an excuse they heard, and the other one's like, wait a minute, does that ring a bell? And it totally does. They realize they've been fed the exact same excuses, often in the exact same order. It's this repeating cycle of false promises, all designed to just stall and stall and stall. It made each of them think they were the only ones having problems, when really it was happening to everybody. And sure, the details were a little different for each of them. One guy was getting inconsistent payments, missing a month here and there. The other one had been cut off completely for 6 months straight. But the bottom line, it was exactly the same. The money had just stopped.
It doesn't take them long to figure out her method. It's the oldest trick in the book, right? A classic robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of scheme. She was just taking in new money from one person to pay fake returns to another. It created this fragile illusion that everything was fine, all while she was digging herself into a deeper and deeper hole.
And the more they dig, the more they realize this thing went way, way beyond just the two of them. The scam, it wasn't targeting random strangers on the internet. No, this was a deep betrayal. It was exploiting the closest personal and family relationships you can imagine.
Get this, one of the men explains his way in was through his wife. Turns out she and Ghazala were old school friends. That trust, that history, that was the way in. And from there, the web just spread out to his wife's friends, members of Ghazala's own family, and even her next-door neighbors. Nobody was off limits. So, trying to find her, one of the guys had actually managed to talk to her cousins. And the story they spun him, it was this desperate, tragic tale about how she was in the hospital after an overdose. It's the kind of story designed to make you feel bad for her, to get you to back off. But the other guy, who's clearly been down this rabbit hole a little longer, he just shuts that down immediately. Nonsense, he says. She's not.
He knows it's just one more manipulation, another lie in a very long string of them. He is way past the point of believing anything that comes from her or her family.
And then a new name pops up, ZR Associates. It's a company, seems to be linked to property, and it's registered to her mother's address. And get this, it belongs to her brother, a guy named Zamir Reza. Okay, now this feels like it could be a real breakthrough.
So they actually managed to get the brother on the phone, and he denies everything. He claims he hasn't even spoken to his sister in a decade, says she scammed him out of thousands of pounds too. And his company, ZR Associates, he says it's been dormant for 10 years, hasn't touched it.
Yeah, about that. A quick search on Companies House, that's the UK's official business registry, tells a completely different story. Turns out, accounts for ZR Associates were filed just this past December 27th. Suddenly, the brothers' whole story just crumbles. The company is absolutely not dormant, which, raises some pretty serious questions about what his role really is in all this.
So, as their meeting starts to wrap up, they've made this huge breakthrough, right? They know they're on the same side now, but they haven't actually solved anything. If anything, they've just uncovered an even deeper, more complicated mystery than when they started.
And this leaves them with this massive fundamental question. One of them still kind of thinks that maybe, just maybe, it didn't start as a scam, that it felt legitimate at first. So, which is it? Did a real business just go horribly wrong and collapse, or was this whole thing a calculated deception right from the very beginning?
And then there's the brother. What's his deal? Is he really another tragic victim, just like he says, totally used and betrayed by his own sister? Or is he a hidden player in all this, using his dormant company to help her pull it off?
And that leads us to the final, really provocative thought here. As one of the men points out, you have to ask yourself, is a woman whose entire family lives right there in the area really brave enough, or maybe foolish enough, to try and pull off a scam this big all by herself? So this meeting that started with two guys ready to fight, it ends with one really chilling question. Who else was in on it?